Good afternoon, Colin here with Techout, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Alta Labs management interface on their web console here, or web-hosted management interface. And I just set this up yesterday, had some time to play around with it. I did do a video on this during my initial access point setup, so that is on the end of that video, but the audio is kind of quiet, so I figured I would do a dedicated video on the interface just by itself for people who wanted to see that. So here we are. We're just going to go tab by tab here, and I'm going to show you the features on each page and what they do. So the dashboard is pretty self-explanatory. Here we just have how many network devices you have, so that's going to be how many access points and switches you have. I currently have 3 access points connected. How many devices are connected to those access points in my case, and then applications, which are things that are being detected by the access points. Just for activity and usage history and stuff like that. So you can see how much each different top application is using. And then we have your network activity. One thing I like is the real-time graph, and you can just go second by second and see real-time activity history. You can also sort it by 1 hour, 2 days, and 2 months. Obviously, this is limited because it's only been online for just over 24 hours. Down here you can choose to change this to your devices, so you can see device activity, and then right here you can see your network activity. So that is the dashboard page in a nutshell, and then of course you can see your active devices here and your top active network devices here. It shows up to 5. I only have 3, so it shows all of them right there, but they do change the order based on who is most active. If we hop over to network here, this is where you're going to have your network devices, again, such as switches and access points. I only have access points connected right now, but I will have some switches later on. So you can click on an access point. You have to click on the little icon right there, and you get the settings window. It is a floating window, so you can move it around. You can open multiple windows and compare your settings, change your settings, all that kind of stuff, which is very nice. If you want to rename an access point, you can click the access point name over here, rename your access point right there. Has your IP address. I just use static IP addresses for my access points. And then you can see your load information right here. So CPU, memory, and uptime are all right there. And then you have your Wi-Fi channels for your 2.4 and 5 gigahertz networks. And you can see the channel usage and stuff like that right there if you hover over it. Right here we have devices, and that's how many devices are currently connected to each access point. One thing I did suggest to Alta on the forum is be able to see what devices are connected to each access point on the access point itself, instead of having to go over to the devices tab to do it, because you have to sort through your devices to find out which access point a certain device is connected to, rather than on like Ubiquity, where you can just go to the access point and get a list of everything connected to it. So I hope that's something they add in the future. And then we have your MAC address right here, your software version. You'll also get a little update icon right here if there is a software update available. So that will appear there to update it. You have your colors right here, which will go more in depth about the colors here in a second, and you'll see exactly what those mean. And then you have your status right here, which is just the usage graph. So if we hop over to an access point right here, we only need one of these open because they're all 3 going to be the same. But we have your Wi-Fi settings, so your 2 gigahertz and your 5 gigahertz channel, or your radio settings. So you can do your channel, you can do auto, or you can manually set it, and then you can change your bandwidth. I have pretty good AP coverage, so I use the higher bandwidth because it carries more more data faster, stuff like that. But you do lose a little bit of signal that way, but again, I do have enough coverage that doesn't really affect anything. Colors down here, again, we'll get into this and how you set this up here in a second, but the colors, you can add colors to the access point right here if you want to broadcast more SSIDs. And then under advanced, you just have your transmit power right there. Again, you can do auto, high, medium, or low. If you have a lot of access points in a closed space and your network is very dense, you might want to lower down the power so they're not overlapping so much, as devices have a hard time switching from one access point to another. I noticed when I had a couple too close together. My devices weren't roaming, and some devices were connecting to one farther away instead of the one closest to them. So I moved them a little bit and changed the power. I moved it to medium at first, and that did fix the connection, but I did put it back on auto once that was resolved. And then we just have the network settings right here, so you can do a static IP address, set your DNS and stuff like that right there. It's where you would set your management VLAN. The fallback upon failure automatically sets it back to VLAN 1 and uses a DHCP address. I did have an issue with one of my Ethernet cables yesterday on my downstairs office access point to where it lost connection, and the access point, instead of using DHCP, instead of using the static IP, it automatically obtained one over DHCP, so it got a new IP address, and that way you can still connect to it in the event of an issue, and it just saves you from having to go on site and maybe do a factory reset physically on the device. And then once that's fixed, once you're connected again, you can just reset your static IP address. Always on keeps the AP broadcasting when your internet goes down. By default, if your internet goes down and this is off, so your AP would stop broadcasting a Wi-Fi signal. And I guess that's good if you have devices that try to stay connected to Wi-Fi even with the internet down, where you may want them to switch over to like a cellular connection. But for a home environment, I do have stuff on the local network where I want the Wi-Fi to still be active. I still want to be able to connect to like my NAS and stuff like that if my Wi-Fi is down. And my phone usually automatically switches over to cellular anyway. So I did turn that on all the access points, and I recommend just setting that on by default. And then mesh allows the access point to wirelessly mesh to the other one if the wired connection fails. So if something happens to your Ethernet cable, as long as that access point is still getting power, it will mesh to another access point and connect to it wirelessly, so you can still kind of extend your network, but you just won't have that wired backhaul. So that's basically the network settings for your devices. And then in devices here, of course, self-explanatory, this is all your connected devices, so everything connected to your Wi-Fi access points. So you have the name, the the IP address, MAC address, make, model, all that kind of stuff. Their signal channel, what access point they're connected to. So this is what I was talking about right here. You have to go to this list to see what access point everything is connected to, where I would like to be able to go to an access point and see everything that's on that access point without having to scroll through this list. So you can just go page by page here. A lot of the no-name stuff are phones or devices that are set by default to use randomized MAC in their settings, so they don't actually get a name. That's where that comes from. You can see the Wi-Fi version they're on, so Wi-Fi 5, 6, whatever it may be. What SSID they're connected to. I only have one active SSID right now, so they're all connected to the same network. Right here you can block a device or reconnect a device. The only time I really use reconnect is like if I see a device right here, like this device is connected to the upstairs access point when there is an access point right here next to that device. So I'll usually just go ahead and reconnect a device with a low signal like that, in hopes that it will change to that new access point that's closer to it. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I don't know why the devices like to connect to one across the house when there's one in the same room as them. That has nothing to do with Alta. That's just the device being dumb about how it's selecting its access point and signal and stuff like that. But everything else, for the most part, you can see here has a pretty good signal strength. There's a couple devices out in the garage that are kind of low, but I am putting an access point out there. I just haven't gotten out there to do it yet. So that's all your access point stuff right here. You can also click on a device and get that same floating window, and you can put a device on a different network, so like IoT, internet only guest. You can do that per device. You can do a per device, put it on a VLAN, bypass the hotspot, bypass the schedule, bypass the filter, set an upload or download rate limit, or change the device's icon right here. So they have some brand name ones, like YouTube, iOS, PlayStation, LG, and then they have just some generic icons right down there too. So that's pretty cool. But they're all set to just little Wi-Fi icons by default, and I haven't gone through to change all those. You can also sort this by live, 1 hour, 2 hour, 2 days, 2 minutes, 2 months. And you can also choose some other stuff here on what it shows in the different columns. Over here in settings, this is going to be where you set up your Wi-Fi and system settings, and this is where we'll get into those colors I was talking about. So if we click on my main network here, you can see here that the color is set to black, which is all APs by default. So we'll just go back here for a second and look at the guest network, because it's a better example. So say you set up a guest SSID or a second SSID that you don't want broadcast on all your access points. You can see here that this SSID is set to gray. So if we go back to our network here, you can see that only the upstairs access point has a gray color, which means only that access point is broadcasting that SSID. So if I want this access point to broadcast that SSID, you just set it to gray. So the gray is kind of just like choosing what device is broadcasting what. And I think when you get into the switches as well, there may be some other stuff you can do with the colors. But basically, you can assign SSIDs certain colors, and then you assign those colors to the corresponding access points that you want to broadcast that SSID. So that's basically what the colors do, pretty self-explanatory. And then you can see each SSID's color right there. So pretty easy way of doing that, really nice and intuitive in my opinion. Going back here into the SSID settings, I am using WPA3, which does limit us to certain settings here, like the password section. If you have WPA3 turned off, you can use one SSID and have different passwords. So if I wanted to have a password protected guest network with the same SSID, I can do that, and then I can set the guest password here. So when you give somebody that password, they're automatically connected to the guest network instead of your main network, even though it's sharing the same SSID. Again, you can't do that using WPA3, so I do have a separate guest and main network. My guest network is also unprotected, and then the password goes through my UDM Pro using tickets, which have just one-time use codes on them. So that's how I do that. You can add sites right here. So if you have a second location, maybe it's a business, you have two business locations, you can use the same SSID between both of them, add both sites, and then your Wi-Fi credentials and settings are shared between them. So if you go, you are a customer, maybe if they have access to your Wi-Fi or the guest network or something like that, they go to your second location, they can automatically connect to the Wi-Fi there. Or say you have like a vacation home or something like that, you can have the same SSID in both locations and do that. And then down here we just have your bands, fast roaming settings, all that kind of stuff. Again, your VLAN settings and that. So that is pretty much it for this. And then back here we have your system settings, which is just going to be your light color, which you can change per AP on the AP settings page that I showed before, and time zone and stuff like that. And then you can add multiple users. I am signed into this account via Google, so I don't have an actual Alta account. I use the Google sign-in. So that's how you do that. If you want to add a new site, you just hit that right there, and you can add, oops, sorry, that's an SSID. The sites are going to be up here under Site Manager right there. So you can add new sites, click on a site, and then that's how you edit it right there and get into it. So that's pretty much the Alta Networks web management right there in a nutshell. Pretty easy to use, very intuitive, very nice. I'm Colin with Techout. Don't forget to comment, rate, and subscribe. Have a great day.